In this battle, we're going to be testing the Thorax Hoplites and the Wodanaz spears against each other. Both are spear units, no shit, but they do come with some very different abilities and capabilities on the battlefield. The Thorax Hoplites and Mercenary Veteran Hoplites are overall better in extended melee, due to the fact they have more armor and a higher amount of armor penetrating damage. The phalanx also gives them even more bonuses versus infantry, whereas the Wodanaz, even though they have 30 weapon damage, they do not have any abilities that increase their killing power in melee. And the Thorax Hoplites and Mercenary Veteran Hoplites have 2 more armor penetration against the Wodanaz spears. However, the Wodanaz spears already have a fairly low armor value, so it doesn't matter as much as it would do against more heavily armored units. But the Wodanaz spears have the shield screen ability. They also have precursors, so the precursors are going to do a massive amount of damage on the charge. The Wodanaz, higher melee defense, higher missile block, and higher morale. The melee attack is higher for the Thorax Hoplites when they get to use their Hoplite phalanx. But you'll notice in this test as well that the barbarian units tend to wrap around the disciplined units. Because 2 ranks deep, the barbarian unit is wider. So on the charge, Mercenary Veteran Hoplites lose to the Wodanaz quite convincingly there. Even though the Wodanaz only have a 29 charge bonus. But what happens when the Wodanaz go into shield wall is that the Wodanaz gets a massive melee defense, so they're going to get hit less than these Thorax Hoplites, even though the Thorax Hoplites get a bonus to get a bonus versus infantry in this formation. Now keep in mind, not all bonuses show up on the unit card, so you won't see the increased melee attack here for the Mercenary Veteran Hoplites, and for the you won't see the increased weapon damage as well, which is a bit odd. But it's there in the database anyway. So in the extended fight, the Wodanaz spears winning slightly here, and the Thorax Hoplites are losing. Over here, the Mercenary Veteran Hoplites start to win, and basically, the longer this fight goes on, the better it is for the heavily armored Mercenary Veteran Hoplites. But this was without using precursors, so let's just fast forward and see how it goes. 83 men remaining, 50 men remaining, so the Mercenary Veteran Hoplites doing a much better job than the Thorax. It's too bad that the Mercenary Veteran Hoplites are limited to 2 units. If the factions that can bring Mercenary Veteran Hoplites could bring 4, that would help them a bit. Because there's a big gap in the Athenian roster between the Veteran Hoplites, the Thorax Hoplites, and these Picked Hoplites. And the Picked Hoplites are much too expensive. So the Thorax Hoplites here lost to the Wodanaz only just, and this is interesting because the Wodanaz spears are more expensive than the Thorax, than the Veterans and the Thorax Hoplites. So let's just finish off the fight here. Getting a bit of a weird charge, but they should be able to kill the remaining Wodanaz. So in terms of infantry killing power without using precursors, the Wodanaz spears they do not perform in a cost-efficient manner against the Hoplites. Now let's see if that changes when they use their precursors, because having 120 javelins with 12 armor penetration and 20 base damage for a total of 32 damage, that is going to damage a lot of these Hoplites on the charge, and it should allow the Wodanaz spears to do even better on the charge against the Hoplites. Now something I haven't mentioned yet is that the shield screen ability makes the Wodanaz spears stationary. So if you see a Wodanaz spear using shield screen, you can wait until the shield screen is activated, pull out, and then get a second charge in on the Wodanaz. And that's very good if you have high charge infantry. Even if you have precursors as well, it can be a very effective way of dealing with a defensive unit like that. You can even do it against the Mercenary Veteran Hoplites. So any unit that has a defensive ability, you can charge in, wait for them to activate their defensive ability, pull out, and ideally you would want to charge in with another unit, not use the same unit. So that if these mercenary veteran Hoplites or the Wodanaz, if they follow the unit in, then you'll be able to block with the second unit. But of course that relies on having 2 lines of infantry to use. And you won't always have that luxury. So, precursor time. The Wodanaz cost 890, I believe, whereas these mercenary veterans 820, and I think the Thorax Hoplites are 710. So there is a significant price difference on the field here, but the Wodanaz have increased cavalry killing capabilities with cavalry counter tactics, of course. And you can see that the mercenary veteran Hoplites drop a lot quicker when the Wodanaz are allowed to use their precursors. So dropping very rapidly. And what you'll often see in this game is that a 10% increase in price between 2 units often means that if those units are cost effective, that the unit that costs 10% more is going to be the superior one, if you're talking about units of the same category, so like spears, swords, stuff like that. Not always, but there's a trend towards that. So yeah, the Thorax Hoplites are getting, when the precursors are being used, the Wodanaz spears, 40 men remaining, 38 men remaining, so they win quite comfortably here. Or not comfortably, but it's very close. They only just win, but they do win, and that's quite important. So let's see what, because the Wodanaz, obviously now fast charge hasn't been used. So one of the things that makes the Wodanaz spears potentially a lot more dangerous is that you can use fast charge on them and then pride. And when you use fast charge and pride, the Wodanaz spears become a very dangerous unit, even against enemy sword units. And of course you don't have the luxury of using abilities as powerful when you're commanding the picked Hoplites of Athens here. They can basically only use battle rhythm, second wind to augment their killing power, and you don't get a whole lot for the extra you pay for picked Hoplites. It's very strange that the picked Hoplites are almost 50% more expensive than the veterans, and you get very little back from that. They have a poor charge bonus, melee defense isn't great, they have the same armor, only 65 health, 75 base morale, which is very high, but let's see here. Okay, the reason why I'm letting them be stationary here is because they have expert charge defense, so the Wodanaz charging in with their massive charge bonus, they're going to do a lot of damage to themselves. But in this case, even though I had formation attack off, since I didn't give an attack order, the phalanx starts to reform, and that is of course a huge problem for the picked Hoplites. But the picked Hoplites actually won on the charge there, because even though they didn't charge, because the Wodanaz impaled themselves on the spears of the picked Hoplites. But when the Wodanaz start wrapping around the picked Hoplites now, things are not going to go too well for the picked Hoplites. And activating Pride, so 42 weapon damage here for the Wodanaz spears for a short time. But when that ability wears off, now we have 50 picked Hoplites fighting against 79 Wodanaz, and the Wodanaz are going to start dropping. But I sort of made a mistake in this test, because I didn't consider the balance of power. So Athens would have needed to have more units to be able to not rout possibly not rout due to army losses. But as you can see, the picked Hoplites in extended melee, when the Wodanaz don't have their abilities anymore, the picked Hoplites will do really well against Wodanaz spears. But they are so expensive that they become very, very cost inefficient against a lot of enemy units. So if they cost like 980, maybe they would be nice if they for Athens. As it is, most elite spear units are too expensive, and I'd say the same about the Wodanaz. They are too expensive. They are a nice little unit, but the more Wodanaz you bring, the more you pay for a unit that is... It's a decent unit, but it has a few shortcomings. That means that against the standard barbarian faction, they won't do too well unless used in a very specific manner. So that's it. The Wodanaz can definitely defeat the Hoplites head-on when they're able to use their precursors, but they do so being quite significantly more expensive. And as is the case with any Hellenic faction, or any civilized faction, you need to stop barbarians from getting their charges, and ideally, the picked Hoplites and Thorax Hoplites and mercenary veteran Hoplites are going to be second-line infantry behind other types of infantry. The problem is, though, that you don't have any cheap precursor infantry that you can use and send in the same way that the barbarian factions do. The barbarian factions you can use your militia Hoplites, but the problem with militia Hoplites, they don't have precursors, so a lot more vulnerable to cavalry charges. And although they will defeat a unit like Levy Freemen when using phalanx, the Levy Freemen can also throw their precursors at them back and forth, and it makes it hard for the Athenian and the Greek factions to compete. Strength and honor.